previously on In Transition.
You have having a client that wanted to release weight, and it was, I have to do this. I have to do this. And that was one of the things that I needed to, I think one of the things I said, we hit this, she had me do this list of what you prefer versus what you demand of yourself. And I said, I demand of myself to lose 20 pounds. And she's like, but why? And I'm like, well, because of this and this and this. And she's like, but who said? And I'm like, well, because of this and this. Okay, but reframe that. And she's like, you would prefer to lose that. But if you don't, it's okay. And I mean, and that just like blew my mind, how you speak to yourself based on what you were told as a kid, based on what you see as an adult,
Yeah. But the beauty is your interruption of that.
Yeah.
And I want to give some light there for that, because the awareness is where you get to interrupt the pattern. And then once you interrupt the pattern, you're interrupting the pathology, you're telling others, you're living it. And then when, slippage happens, when it creeps up where that voice starts coming back, you're able to recognize it. And that's growth.
Yeah. And that's exactly how she framed it. Yeah. Yeah. It was exactly how she framed it. She goes, this isn't going to be a one and done type thing. She's like, yeah, okay, the voice is gone right now. It's going to come back. It's going to try to come back louder. It's going to try to come back a different way. So you have to, it's a muscle. You have to constantly exercise it. It was a 6-week program. I think I had to have cried at least for 7 weeks because it was just a shedding, if you may, of just like, man, who says I can't do this? Who says I have to do this? Why am I putting this demand on myself? To your point about Mary J. Blige, why do I hate myself so much? And it wasn't a physical hatred. It wasn't like, God, I hate you, Corey. It was me not honoring myself and being true to the things that I want to do because it's my list.
We are so excited to be back for part 2 of this conversation. If you haven't listened to part 1, we encourage you to go back and take a listen. Now on to the show.
That's right.
Yeah.
The stories we tell ourselves. And, it really goes back to giving ourselves permission to can we just give ourselves permission to just be in a space to be how we need to be?
Yeah.
With whatever shows up. And another offering that, something that was offered to me that I now offer to folks that I talk to when the voice comes up is give it a name. Like, my ego's name is Candy because Candy makes it so sweet. And I spell my Candy with a D-I at the end because reverse is ID, which is the id, which is the super ego. Ooh. Because Candy will have me believing that I need to talk myself out of doing Good Morning Gorgeous because so many other people out there are doing women's workshops online right now. And, I what can I possibly offer? And so then I have to say, okay, Candy, you made that real sweet, but Tanishia is going to tell a different story. And I also have to sit with my inner child. And so, sometimes that's my 8-year-old that, is like, we feel uncomfortable sometimes when we say something, if it's not quite validated by the adults, because that was me when I was younger. There was a lot of colorism in my family and a lot of attachment to favoritism with one of my siblings. And so, or at least let me say this, that's the story that I told myself. And because I've released myself even from the childhood story, I can now stand in my power and say, this is the work that I'm supposed to be doing. So it's also, even living through childhood experiences, we don't have to not validate it, but sometimes we got to recognize how young is the person making the decision in our lives. So when I go to a meeting and someone is getting credit for something and I'm sitting there, people call it hating or feeling like, well, am I going to get acknowledged because I did do this? Well, how old is she? Yeah, because certainly the adult knows that this person deserves to get. So sometimes we've got to say, and my husband, because we talk about inner child so much, is so funny because I'll do something or say something and he'll just be like, how old is she? Or I'll say, how old is he? And so I take my little girl on play dates and I do fun things and I sit with her. And when I get really, when I really start getting in this mode of doing versus being, I know that's my inner teenager because I was a teen mom and I had to she had to get the job done. She's the fighter. She's the one because she's 15 and she's a mother. And there's no way people, the doctor is talking to my mother about what's going on with my body, with my child inside of me and not me. And I've got to advocate at that age. And now, I'm trying to make sure I can support my child. So I also can recognize when I'm resistant to something that I need to surrender. And I know that's my teenager.
Wow.
That's so good.
And so that's the work. The work is the work on ourselves first. And
you're like, hey, 15-year-old me, I've got you.
I've got you. I've got to
we're good.
Like, you know
like
what?
It's good. Just chill. We're good. Yeah.
And I do that with my family. I love my family, and and now I've strengthened that bandwidth so much because I have, released from some of the residual trauma, things that came up in childhood. And I had beautiful moments in childhood, and then I had other stuff. And so even when I go with my family, I have that conversation with the little girls and say, this is what we're going to do. These are how we're going to honor boundaries. We're not going to stay in a room when something is said and it doesn't feel good. And we feel like we got to sit there and take it because da 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 da.
Yep.
We're going to get up with love and say, I love y'all. I'll see y'all later. I've got to go. Mm-hmm. We're going to end conversations over the phone when they become really uncomfortable. That's the honor. That's the space of moving toward love. The transition from being attached to external validation and worried about how people feel and calling it love because I love them is actually an attachment to fear as to whether or not you're really, the undercurrent of that is I fear the love will be taken away if I really show up the way I want to show up and honor myself. That's not love, that's fear. The minute I attach to something that I want to say that I'm not going to say, or I just need to suck it up and deal with what's being said or done to me because I love the person, that's not love, it's fear. Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. And so it's a practice every day, though, that I have to engage in. It is a daily practice of releasing and shedding and forgiving and compassion and gratitude and love, first to myself and then to others.
But when you're able to show that practice to yourself in an act of love, it's that much easier to extend that in expressing it to others.
Absolutely. Yeah. I can give more compassion. So the folks that I think about that I used to work with, I used to, back in the day when I was working in office settings, school buildings, I was a school counselor and working with women that would just be so, would just say certain things to students. And I would just look in horror, like, how could she say that? How could he say that? Mm. And now what I say is, imagine how they talk to themselves.
Yeah.
Imagine. So when someone says something to me that is, because I believe whatever we call, whatever we're living is the truth of what we believe about ourselves. Mm-hmm. So whoever your friends are, whoever is in your circle, however your business, it's a reflection of what you believe about yourself. And so I don't get like someone's like, do you have toxic relationships? I was trauma bonded in a lot of relationships, but I don't have toxic relationships. And when I see toxic things show up, I'm now aware of how to release it because I first say, where is the toxic in me that called this experience? And so, if someone says something negative, I'm like, that's their stuff. Imagine what they're saying to themselves. But, some of it I can let roll off because I can now identify the difference between it being someone else's stuff and whether or not it's truly my experience. Because I remember that I am are my two words. Yeah. I get to that.
And it's kind of that whole idea of hurt people, mm-hmm. Right? So I always say that too. Whenever anyone's upset by something someone else says, I was like, realize this has nothing to do with you and everything to do with them. Mm-hmm. So it's often us projecting onto other people. Absolutely. Or we trigger other people in some way. You're like, oh, but I like how you're looking at that. I wonder how they talk to themselves because they talk to me this way. Can only imagine how much worse that is. Yes. So even when you first started talking, I was like, oh, she's going to talk about intergenerational trauma. Oh, yeah. I love this topic because I feel like it's getting a little bit buzzy right now. Like people are starting to like wake up to this idea of, oh, we pass on trauma generation to generation.
Dr. Joy DeGruy has been talking about it for years. And, one of my educational teachers, I was fortunate and blessed enough to do work with her years ago in Rochester, New York, when she was introducing her relationship approach to working with students in schools. But she required that all educators, including superintendent, those on the board, like they get engaged in that work first. Oh, wow. And, I had some knowledge of like generational trauma and epigenetics. I like some, but it went even deeper on a deeper level with me. And then it turned into then the spiritual sense that we actually do pass this down, but the beauty is we can interrupt it. If we say yes to the call within us, that we can create something different. We have the power to create. We're in oneness, or I'm in oneness with Creator. So I have the power to think differently, because I say it all the time, that which we create in our minds, that which we think, we tend to then believe. Once we believe it, then we speak it. Once we speak it, then we behave it. Once we behave it, then we become. So I always ask myself daily, what is my becoming today? And my becoming is what I think. And so even what I was raised with and what I was told in terms of parenting and what it means to be in partnership with someone, I had to shift what I was creating around what I was originally told and taught. Not to say that those experiences were bad or not correct, it just for me no longer is my truth in terms of how I live life.
You're a cycle breaker.
Yes.
And somebody has to be it, and it typically falls on the person that one recognizes it, and has, I don't want to say strength. I don't know how I really want to phrase this, but somebody has to do it to relay the foundation of what's yet to come.
Absolutely.
And I think like not to keep referring to my family, but my cousins and I recognize this stuff. Primarily my cousin. She's my cousin, but we're more like sisters, so we call each other cousin. And she and I talk about it all the time. And like we'll see stuff happen that either her dad will do or my mom will do because they're siblings. And we both just kind of look at each other, or there'll be like this, if we're talking on the phone or we're texting, there'll be like this pregnant pause. And then all of a sudden we'll just say, we blame Lenore, which was my grandma.
Oh, wow.
And God rest my grandmother's soul. She was an amazing grandmother, but there was a lot of generational stuff that was in that tiny 5'5" frame woman. And my cousin and I and her brother, not so much my brother because he lived with my dad after my parents split up, but the three of us were just like, no, we're not going to do that. Nope. Nope. It's not on our to-do list to do anymore. We're good. You guys raised us. We know the difference between right and wrong. You gave us, we have very good heads on our shoulders. We're very smart. We got this. It's good.
That's right.
It's like a script interrupt.
Yeah,
absolutely. It's like, and that's what I say. I love that word interrupts because, I was having this, there was a breakdown in my family, and they said, you always this, you always that, you always got to be the one to speak on this and just not go with it or whatever. And I remember just sitting and listening one time, and something within me spirit within me just said with love, when they were done, because normally I would do the back and forth, but I was shifting, I was transforming, and I let him go. And then I waited for the space and the silence and let them get off everything they needed to. And I said, because I am the interruption. Ooh. That's why. Ooh, I am the interruption.
Yeah.
And I stand in that and I own it. And I didn't when I was younger. So when I was younger, I would say, how come my older sister is favored? How come they're not? How come I don't receive that love from my dad in that way? How come I don't receive love, from my mom or my grandmother in that way? How come? And now I recognize that I called that experience, my soul, my spirit called that entire experience. I chose that. Yeah. From the time my fabric was woven by God in my mother's womb. I chose that, and God chose that path because at some point the pattern needed to be interrupted. And so when I was little, and I would get whoopings for it, you always got to be the one to say something. You always think you know everything. You always know it all. Now I switched those words and I was like, I was onto something. I did know. I no longer see it as a negative. And what I learned was I got to tell the story in a different way, because I was onto something then, but because I saw it, like, you always got to be the little black such and such to always come out your mouth with such and such. You always got to know it all. You always got it. And now I flip that and I say, I do have an inner knowing. I've always had it. And now I stand in it. And I'm grateful for the experience, and went through a forgiveness journey, with my family, including my grandmother, who is deceased. She would have turned 111 years old on April 26th.
Oh, wow.
And it was, my childhood was very, was challenging with her. And I know that a lot of it was her upbringing as well. And, so that's why I said, wow, I was able to forgive and release a lot and shed throughout my transformation and my transition, because I was able to go back into thinking, wow, what she must have thought about herself every time, she would deposit pain into me. The pain she must have been depositing to herself. It doesn't mean that my little girls let me off the hook with not being able to sit with them for how that felt. I give them the space to grieve and mourn, but then I can get back to reparenting myself and and sharing a different story so that they can also be strengthened. But yeah, it's we are the interruption, and there is one in every family. And we used to call it the black sheep. I no longer use that term. And I used to be called the black sheep. You're the one
with being that.
Yeah. It's right.
I kind of enjoyed it. I kind of enjoyed it.
The interruption. Right.
Yeah, I enjoyed it a little bit.
Well,
and I'm always in these spaces now with working with women. And it's amazing that this is my ministry, because every woman I am in partnership with, all of my clients that I have worked with, male and female, similar childhood experience. And they're like, why was it me? And I'm sitting up there like, I don't want to have them arrive at a place before they're ready. They'll come to their own realization. But, I'm connected with so many people. You're simply and powerfully the interruption of what was being taught as truth with the small t, but not truth with the big T. So you're the big T truth. And that comes with a lot of responsibility, and can feel like it come with a lot of painful points in life and experiences. It oftentimes is. The greater you grow into it, and the backlash, the betrayal, but at some point when you fully stand in your yes to who you are, when I fully stand in my yes to who I am, I find that those experiences, they don't lessen, but I have more tools that I can work with to maneuver whatever comes up, and how I need to navigate that life experience, be it with a family member or someone in business or whatever it is. And that's the beauty of this work. That's the beauty of this work is discovering that. And to answer the other question, like, why don't people do that, is because doing that takes a lot. And it's easier to be with the person I know within me than to surrender and say, I don't know who my becoming is, but I surrender to it. It's easier to say, I know who I am. I know I got to work on a few things here and there. I'm going to check off some of these boxes. That's easy. Yep. It's much more harder to say, I surrender every day who I think I know I am to who I am becoming. And I don't mean just pieces of it. I mean all of it. All that stuff that we do that nobody else sees about who we are. Like, actually saying, I'm going to step into all that I am and fully love all the layers of that and work through it and embrace all layers of me, the shadow, the light, all of it takes a lot of work and courage, and it's scary. And it's easier to just be like, nope, I'm going to stay right where I am. And this is what I know. And I'm just going to stay with that. And that's the work that we're called to do for a lifetime, because it never ends. It never ends. The work is continuous. There is no, healing is not our purpose or our what we should, like there's all of this healing. Like that's not it. It's just embracing and loving who we are. And we've got some healing that we do along the way. We've got some shedding that we do. We've got some releasing and we've got some acceptance. It's all beautiful. It's a beautiful mess.
That's what it is. It is. I was like, healing to me is like breathing. Yeah. You're just always doing it.
Always doing it.
And I think the longer you do it, it feels more like breathing too, where it's just like a natural process where you don't even have to think about it. Like you're looking for those opportunities where you're like, oh, that was healing. And I love that you said forgiveness journey. Absolutely. Because I've been through that too. I was like, that was the big realization. When you start to do all that work, you start to realize there's so much forgiveness that needs to happen. And my realization was the biggest amount of forgiveness needed to actually happen with myself.
Yes.
Right? You hold on to so much, like all those shoulds and those things. And you're like, I've been making my life so much harder on myself by trying to like be something that I'm not, or to be what other people want me to be.
Yeah.
So
powerful.
It's, I mean, it's the journey of our life, right?
Absolutely. And there's power in that. There's so much power in that because the self-forgiveness is it's almost like every day we've got to shed something. And it's this, and also the story we told ourselves about even the bad things that happen. So I had to go on a forgiveness journey with saying, every time I tell that story, I retell it in that way. So I forgive myself and release from telling that story without talking about who I became on the other side. I don't want to tell the story no more about the doom and gloom. I'm not victim, I'm victor. I am a victor in this. I'm not victimized by it. And so the self-forgiveness work, because, I've talked to people who say, well, I don't really know how to begin with the forgiveness. And I'm like, it can be forgiveness for what you tell yourself about something that's happened to you and you're replaying it and retelling it over and over and over again and keeping yourself bound to that story you told yourself, so much so that you can't even move on to something greater that's waiting because you keep telling yourself a story of what happened to you from a place of victim.
My mom,
more power than that.
My mom says something at that point, that every time you tell a bad story, every time you tell a toxic story or something that you were a party to, you are reopening the wound all over again. And you are leaning into that pain. You are identifying as that person that you honestly probably no longer am, or are rather. And so it took me a while to like just stop telling those, well, this happened and this happened and this happened. Okay, it happened. It's not happening, And the first time my mom ever said that to me, I just kind of looked at her and she's like, the sooner you stop telling those stories, the sooner you stop living somewhat she goes, you have 1 foot in the story and 1 foot on the other side. The sooner you stop doing that, the quicker you can start to forgive yourself. And she was like, I had done something super duper bad. And she's like, we've all forgotten. You haven't. She was like, let it go. You keep mentioning it. We're over it.
That's right.
And she's like, you just got to let it go. It was a mistake. This happened. You learn from it. Okay.
Absolutely.
Yeah. Somehow like our past mistakes or things we just regret, whatever it may be, they end up being like stage 5 clingers in our life.
Yeah.
They're just there. You're like, I can't release them.
I can't let you go. But
like, why are you serving me anymore? But
you're holding on. But yeah, it was just the quicker when she said it, it's like the quicker you let it go, the quicker you stop telling the story, the sooner you will forgive yourself.
Absolutely.
And I'm just like, oh. And then she was like, yeah, I'm not that old. I still got some knowledge in me. And I'm like, yeah, okay, thanks, Mom.
Andrea does.
Andrea, when she talks, she's like E.F. Hutton. You got to listen when Andrea talks.
So I would love like to spend the last few minutes really just helping those that are listening that know they have things they need to quote unquote unpack from their past. Cause that's kind of how I look at it. It's like, we're unpacking the baggage.
Yep.
What's in there?
Yep.
When you're working with clients, and like, I'm sure this is a part of what you do. Like, we have to get to the truth of who you are and not the story you're playing in your head. How do you start stepping through that? Because I think most people get really intimidated or are like, this is way too much work. There's no way. I'm just going to like leave this over here.
Absolutely. Well, prior to working with clients, each client, I walk them through and have a discovery session on how sessions with me would look. And so prior to every session, I always ask them to sit with themselves for a few minutes, at least 15 to 30 minutes before a session, to come up with what is their intention for the session, not their goal, but their intention.
Okay.
And so when I open up a session, we start first with, how would you like to open? Prayer, meditation, breath work, affirmation, asking them, how they would like to open. And from there, then I'll ask, once we get through that part, what's your intention for today's session? And I'll talk to them about what intentions are. And it's about what you want to experience by the end of the session. And so some of them is like, it's my intention today to talk through this plan I have in this relationship. I want to leave this relationship. And I just want to feel better. And I want to experience at the end of this session, clarity. Mm-hmm. And so, what we work through in that session is really me holding space and listening and making some offerings and, being very mindful of what's being shared and a lot of reframing, because I believe the client already has the answer. Mm-hmm. So when that comes up, like, I want to leave and I don't know how, we do. I think I'm done, but I'm not sure.
You're done.
I think, this relationship is ending, but, I'm not. It either is or it isn't. There, we try to put the in between in there, and we just need someone to support us in getting clear. And so how we get there is definitely breath work and intention. When I see that the client is getting stuck in telling the story. So now I'm going through this whole unraveling of a story about what's happening in the relationship, but you have yet to talk about what's going on in here, and here as in your heart. Mm-hmm. And so I'll make mindful notes and say, you know what, wait, let's take a breath for a second. Because I hear everything you're saying. Let's take a breath. Mm-hmm. Just drop down in your heart. What are you feeling right now? And let's just sit with it. And I leave space for the silence. And sometimes that's a couple of minutes and it seems like a long time. And then I'll just ask, a couple of questions and say, what's coming up for you right now? And what I found is when I leave space for the client to say where they are and what they're experiencing, they kind of already have their next step. It's just sitting with it and knowing whether or not right now, do I have the courage to do what it is that I really want to do? Mm-hmm. And that's what's blocking them. And sometimes they just need someone to kind of help or kind of support them through that. The other thing is, there are some other things that we work through, which is creating a living vision. We talk about a morning practice. And so not just in the space we're in with creating intentions, but I may offer a heart assignment or some heart work around, journaling each day. Mm-hmm. Taking a moment every morning, like let's start with, can you just do 5 or 10 minutes in the morning? And we'll go from 5 or 10 minutes to 20 minutes each morning. Like, what does your morning look like? And many people, like I said earlier, just kind of throw themselves into their morning. Mm-hmm. and not be with themselves. And that has led to a lot of growth with the clients that I work with, just being able to recreate how their day can look. And sometimes that needs to be the start. I can't get to what I want to do because everything's a mess. Like everything from, do you make your bed in the morning? Well, no, I kind of got to get up and I got to rush out. Oh, we got to work. Let's work on this.
You got to make the bed.
Let's work on this, because there is something, there is an attachment between getting up and doing something in order to set your day off, especially, something what some people may see as simple as making your bed. Very important, like what it is that you're doing when you start your day. And so we start there. But aside from that, some of the other work is actually exploring like what it is that you really want. So I have a few different charts we work through with identifying like what do you really want versus what it is that you're telling yourself you want. Like, do you really want this? Or what is the story attached to it? And I'm going to let you right now get out your story. And then we're going to drop down into your heart so you can speak to what it is that you really want. And just creating the space for that and giving the additional work outside of our sessions that's going to support where it is that they're trying to meet the themselves and the truth of who they are, given where they are right now. And that is some really, tough work. And then we start getting into the other, the setting of intentions around how it looks to do life differently. Because once you know what you know about yourself, you have to do things. Your spirit will call. Now I have to do things differently because I can't do it the way I knew that didn't work for me before. And even when slippage comes in, because it will, I stopped doing my morning practice, Coach T. I stopped okay, what are some little things we can do to kind of get back in alignment? And what's showing up there that brought you away? No heat, no judgment. Because we talk a lot of clients come to us with guilt, with shame and judgment. And they're all siblings. Those, you have guilt, and then the sister to guilt is shame. And how people are shackled to that denies them from the very essence of giving themselves permission to break away those shackles so that they can get to their freedom and their power and really operating from a space of what they truly desire. So it's a lot that, goes into it with from client to client, but, ultimately it's meeting them where they are.
Yep. And I think that's so important too. I'm thinking as you're talking that it's so important for anyone listening who's considering working with a coach or has, that their coach is actually walking the walk, that they do the things, they've done the work themselves. So I have to ask the question, Tanishia Johnson, what was the story you were telling yourself, and who are you at your core?
Yes. Ooh. Right. Wow. The story that I used to tell myself is that I don't have it all the way that I think that I do. I don't have it all together. I don't have enough to give. I don't have these special gifts. I don't have the power to really have the things that I want. I don't have the finances. Those are all the things. That's the story I was telling myself. I'm not good enough because, I may be educated in this one way, but I don't have this additional piece that I need. Operating from a place of lack. Those are the stories I was telling myself. Who's going to listen to me when there's so many other great people out there? Who is, do I have anything important that I need to be saying? The story I was telling myself was also, it took me back to when I was in first grade, and I just shared this with someone. And one of the things that my first grade teacher, Sister Christine, told my mother is, she's so social. She talks too much and so much that she has to stop at every desk and make her rounds before she takes her seat.
I used to do that
and
too.
My mother came to that class and pulled my uniform skirt up and I got a whooping in class. Ooh. So from that, the story I would tell myself is, I need to be quiet.
You're too much.
I'm too much. I'm too much. Nobody gets me. I'm doing too much. And I began to tell myself a different story. And I began to tell myself a different story about even what the experience with my mother, that was, from a place of fear. Back then, you got to keep your kids in line. And so, I honor my mother, and where we are now, the 7 and 8-year-old I had to sit with and say, this is where that came from for mommy and for Sister Christine. Every time I would speak, she would, Sister Christine would pop me on the hand with the ruler. And the true core of who I am is that I am divinely guided in all that I do. I am in alignment with Creator God, with Yeshua, because I am a Christian. I am dynamic speaker. I am an incredible coach. I am taking up space in this world, in this universe. I am all that. I am that I am. And I get to say that. I get to say who it is that I am. I am powerful. And I am here to serve. I'm here to serve. The essence and the core of who I am is love. I am love. The love that I am, that God is who you are, is who I am, is what I embrace. And that is the space that I operate from.
Love it. Couldn't say any better, right? It fits.
Yeah, I don't think anything else can or should be said.
I was just thinking, well, what's next for Tanishia? What's on the horizon?
Yeah.
What's next? I am in ministerial ordination training program. It's a 3-year journey. I am now completing year 1. In May, we are completing our final month for year 1. And I'm already a minister. I'm going through, I keep embracing that. And when I was younger, I didn't mention this, but I used to want to be a nun. When I was a little girl, people say, what are you going to be? I'm going to be a nun. And that's how this looks for me in ministry, is that I am embracing becoming a minister. And that's what's next for me. And for me, it's opening a spiritual healing and wellness center community.
Okay.
Where all are welcome, where it's just gonna look different. It's going to look different. I'm a different, spiritually, I'm different. I've released a lot of religiosity. So the more that I embrace all that I am and who creator God is, that whole thing where I was putting God in a box, that it has to look this way or that way. That is what I am continuing to release, the more that I embrace who I am. And so what's next for me is continued growth, continued service to humanity, continued gratitude, continued love, continued service, and ministering. And how minister looks for me is speaking, I'm still going to be keynote speaking, doing weekend retreat experiences for women's conferences. And then once my spiritual healing and wellness community opens, that will be, that's the big P down my leg. That's going to be huge. And another way of embedding service into the universe and to humanity, so that we all embrace our healing.
Tanishia will be keynoting Inside Catalyst.
Absolutely. I mean, that was a given.
That
was a given.
Yes.
Absolute given. I cannot wait for that to happen. So where can our listeners find you? Obviously, we're going to put it in the show notes, but where can our listeners find you?
Yes. So on Instagram, Beyond This Moment. On Facebook, Beyond This Moment Coach. Online, my website is beyondthismoment.com. Okay. And you can also share my business cell phone number where I can be reached there as well, 585-420-8569. I don't use it say it too often, but yes. And so I'm on Instagram. I am on Facebook. I do have a Twitter, but I'm kind of releasing from Twitter. Yeah. I have a TikTok, and I am starting to build that up with sharing coaching tips and things like that. I'm getting ready to. So that's also what's next.
Okay.
Continuing to share coaching tips, affirmational work that I'm doing, and pouring into my children. I haven't had an opportunity to put that in here too. So part of the work is also that, we know charity begins at home, and from our oldest, it's 33, to our youngest, that's 15, like continuing to pour into them and supporting my life partner, my husband, who is an incredible supporter of all the work that I do, and just standing in my yes.
I like that.
Committing to that, standing in my yes, which is standing in the yes of the truth of who I am, the truth with the big T.
Okay.
Love it. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you so much for just being in this space with us for the time that you had. I am fully and genuinely moved, and I just thank you for your words and your encouragement that you've shared with myself and Lauren and this audience. We appreciate you, and I definitely know we will have you back.
I received that. Thank you so much.
Yeah, we appreciate
the space you've created. I appreciate you too, and much love to you, your families, and all of our families and loved ones.
Thank you. And thanks to everyone listening. We'll see you all next week.
Bye, guys. Thank you so much for tuning in this week. We appreciate our listeners more than you could ever know. If you liked any part of what you heard, please, please, please do us a favor and follow the podcast so you never miss an episode. And if you're willing to go a step further, we would love for you to leave us a review and send this episode to a friend that you feel would be served by it in any way. We are so excited to finally share more about Catalyst, the community that we are building in conjunction with this podcast. Our mission with Catalyst is to create an authentic, safe, and inclusive space for heart-centered, growth-minded, multi-passionate women to navigate their life's transitions by building meaningful relationships, learning from one another, and growing into the best version of themselves, and maybe even make the world a little bit better in the process. If you're interested in becoming a founding member of Catalyst, we would love to learn more about you and have you apply at wearecatalyst, all one word, .social. We only have a limited number of spots for this founding member round, so be sure to get your application in soon. Again, the website to apply is wearecatalyst.social. We look forward to the possibility of getting to know you on a deeper level and supporting you in navigating your life's transitions. We cannot wait to have you join us for the next episode. Until then, we encourage you to lean into your community and embrace the growth that inevitably happens when you're in transition. See you guys next week.